Well, good afternoon to our participants. I know some of you have already logged on, and some are just joining us. So we will stall for maybe 30 seconds as people log in. Welcome to our inaugural Jute webinar. This is very exciting for us and very exciting to have all of you with us. So most of you, I think, know who we are. We are a compliance resource. We offer a suite of technology and compliance services designed to really augment and magnify your compliance team. So thank you for joining us. My name is Dina Tantra, and I am our moderator for this panel discussion. We thank you for coming in for the next hour, and hopefully what we intend to do is give you practical advice, useful tips, share some lessons learned. Really, our goal is to make sure those of you who've signed on, one, you know you're not alone. Working from home can be a very isolating thing. You're separated not only from your peers and your colleagues, but from other compliance professionals. We also thought that it would be good to confirm that even though it's common sense, what you're doing is likely best practice. So it's kind of nice to hear from others that, oh yeah, I am doing the right thing. And then hopefully by the end of this, you'll also have some interesting tidbits that you can take back to your place and incorporate into your practices. So I am going to do a couple things. First, we will do some interactive polling questions just to get a sense of who you are. There should be close to 60 of you out there, so we want to hear from you, and that will help us tailor our remarks. Then I will introduce our panelists. We have some dynamic panelists, including an in-house CCO, an external CCO, and an industry attorney as well. And then we will jump right into it. So Alec, if you wouldn't mind, let's knock off some of these polling questions and find out who has joined us. So this will tell us how many employees are in your firm. We're kind of assuming that most people are at smaller firms, but we thought we would check in. Malik, if you're ready, you can show us those results. Oh, interesting. So for those of you, there's actually several. I think it's from some of our insurance compliance professionals, maybe sending us over in the over 50, and then we've got kind of a mix of smaller and mid-sized compliance employees as well. And Alec, the next question, just getting a sense of the asset size of the RIAs that have joined. And if we're ready, we'll move on to the results, and then we'll move forward.
Yep, still getting some of these results in here. Looks like most everyone has voted now. I'm going to go ahead and close this one out.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
I think that's enough data. We'll kind of tailor our remarks from there, and let me, in the meantime, introduce our panelists. So if you'll put the lovely ladies back on the screen, I will start with Melanie Mendoza. Melanie is the Chief Compliance Officer for Madarin Capital, and she is an in-house CCO. Melanie has also worked with a variety of larger firms in both in-house and in consulting services. And I wanted to mention as well, Alec, when you're ready to show Melanie's picture up there, that Melanie has also participated on an advisory board, which did a publication on diversity in the financial services. So that's a very needed part of the financial services space. So kudos to Melanie for that. Then I will introduce Jody Foster. Jody is the president of Symphony Consulting, which is a global investment operations consulting firm. I've known Jody for a number of years, and she's not only steeped in operational background, but in compliance background. She also serves as an independent trustee for an alternative investment mutual fund and is on the board of the Atlanta Women in Alternatives. And again, Alec, if you can show Jody on the screen, that would be great. And I will move on to Nicole Kalajian. She is an attorney with Stradley Ronan, and she has extensive experience in a variety of products, including hedge funds, commodity pools, private equity funds, cryptocurrency, etc. And Nicole is an excellent networker and is fully immersed in the compliance space. Nicole is the founder of the Investment Network, which is originated in Chicago, but I know is national. And she is also a director of the DC Compliance Roundtable. And Nicole is a prolific professional speaker as well. So Alec, if you can get us back to the people, that would be great.
Yeah.
And I think, well, Nicole is there in spirit. Hopefully we will see her soon. We will start off with Melanie, and I'm going to actually, because we've done enough of the polling questions, I'm going to skip the next ones. I know that everyone has participated, so we know you're all getting A's and gold stars for participation, so thank you. Melanie is going to talk about, she's going to lead our discussion. This is not sort of us talking at you intensive slide deck. This is an interactive discussion, and Melanie is going to help us lead that discussion. We'll start off with managing the compliance program remotely. So how this really impacts all of us as we've been working from home, and how the firms are dealing with this whole working from home. Eventually, we will sort of shift gears and focus on Jody leading a discussion about SEC exams and how those have been handled remotely. It's interesting. Jody's has at least 3, I believe, exams going underway. And then Nicole had chimed in that she just received a couple of exam requests just this morning. So I think we will have some really good intel for you. And then finally, we'll talk about how we marry the two, the SEC and the firms. And Nicole is going to walk us through the OC risk alert. What we've done here at Jute is compiled the risk alert into what we think is a useful checklist. Alec is posting the links for all of you to be able to download the checklist from the Jute website. And then I believe, as a party favor, all of you will actually receive the checklist as a thank you for spending an hour with us today. So Let us go ahead and start with Melanie. Melanie, I know you have a variety of topics, and what we want to do is encourage anyone who wants to use the question box that's over there in the GoToMeeting control panel. Please feel free to submit questions or comments, and we'll try and incorporate that into each section. Don't worry, I am used to filling space, so we will be chatting here, and Jody and Nicole, if we can find Nicole again.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We cannot see you.
Okay. I can't see you guys, but now I can hear you. I called in. You guys were all frozen, and then I don't hear or see me earlier. Maybe you could. I don't know.
I tell you what, as a fellow attorney, and I know there are several attorneys online, sometimes it's better to hear and not see your attorney. So as long as you're with us in spirit, we are happy to have you. So Melanie, why don't you walk us through some of the highlights, again, focusing on some anecdotes, either at your firm or what you're hearing in the industry, and Jody and Nicole and I will jump in and talk through some of the good things and maybe some of the pain points of the working from home environment.
Sure. Again, so thank you so much, Dina and Jude, for inviting me on this inaugural webinar. It's great to join the panel with Jody and Nicole. And so before I start, I just wanted to remind everyone that, what I'm saying here is, what I've learned in my experience as a CCO, as a compliance consultant, and also in starting an investment advisory firm. We've proven just now that there's different sized firms in terms of people and AUM. I'm sure that also goes along with the type of client you have, the type of strategies you offer, the types of vehicles you offer. So, some of these things I mentioned today may not be relative to your firm, but hopefully you will get good notes from it in the event you're looking to grow your firm or whatever the case may be. Like Dina mentioned, we want to keep this lively, so if you have any questions to my panelists and also to the audience, just ask the questions. So as CCO of an RIA, it is your responsibility, along with your management committee within your firm, to ensure that you are acting in the fiduciary role that you've been hired to by your clients. Part of that comes to, clients' best interests are first. You have investment advisory agreements signed by your clients, and clients want to know, working in this environment, how is it impacting them? So it really is, how is it impacting your clients? And then secondarily, how is it impacting your firm employees? So there's a lot to think about on the management level to make sure all of this is in place. So, the SEC is focusing on a few different categories and what they're looking at. And Jody will go into that deeper. But they're looking at the general conditions of the firm, operations, liquidity, capital resources, receipt of government assistance during this program, and your company's ability to continue in a going concern. And when might you hit a point, or the straw that broke the camel's back, where maybe you are not a going concern, and how do you communicate that to your clients?
Melanie, I'll jump in, because what I'm hearing you say is it's very much about two-way communication with the clients. Some of it is written disclosure, and some of it is taking the pulse of your clientele and making sure they're feeling secure and comfortable that you are properly managing their money with the right controls in place.
Absolutely. And there's different ways to communicate this, whether you are calling clients directly, whether you are posting information on your website. If you have the type of website with client portals where clients can log in, you can have more individualized or client-specific or strategy-specific information to your clients. And this is something that could be ongoing. You want to make sure that you're going in every month if you're doing this on your website. And if you're sending out general emails to your clients, it is a good idea to have a general, COVID-19 update with your firm and what's going on. Hopefully there's no changes. I mean, we've been in this 7 months now, so I'm sure there was a lot going on when we first started out.
7 months? Oh my gosh. Where have I been?
So I'm going to continue. So I think,
one of the things that you had mentioned as we were preparing for this is also making sure you had consistent messaging. So, it's very easy for employees to fill up the space and kind of come up with their own stories. So making sure everybody's on the same page, making sure the right management personnel are sort of reviewing the types of information that's going out. What do you guys, Jody and Nicole, have you been involved in sort of this external client messaging?
I have. I can start. So yeah, we help with deciding what, if anything, should go on websites, correspondence that should go out to clients, talking about how they're handling the situation. So yeah, we prefer to be involved just so we can help control the messaging, because what you say now could come back years later to haunt you if not sooner. So it's really important to get it right. You don't want to give away too much, and you got to be really careful what you say, and it's easy to kind of go too far too fast on what you say, especially if employees are kind of don't have the higher level of oversight.
Yeah.
Right, agreed. And this is something you can do each month at the end of the first of each month, whatever it is internally. So you create your internal memo, whatever you want to call it, your script that should be used that day, that's approved by your legal, marketing, your management team, IT. I mean, everyone comes into play here because there are a lot of different things everyone has to pull together in terms of how the firm is operational and keeping it that way. And it's not just communication with your clients; it's also to your employees. You want to make sure that they are well informed of what's going on with the firm and what could be going on. It's a delicate balance in terms of if there's going to be potential layoffs, things like that. But it's something that you need to be able to communicate and document also. So,
and that's a great point, Melanie. So I think of it in sort of these batches. You've got the more formal, official, external disclosure, right? Whether it's through your Form ADV, and I know there, people have been on tons of webinars of, did you take a loan, and if so, are you disclosing it, and how you are handling that? And from what I hear, people are sort of on different pages. Some people are saying absolutely disclose your loan or don't take it, turn the money back in, and others are saying, it's not as big a deal. So I don't know if you guys have any anecdotal information about that. But kind of saying, there's your written disclaimers, and then there's your general communication. There's kind of your employee communication, and I am assuming with most firms, HR and legal are sort of helping to drive those internal communications with your employees. And then there's sort of just the general operations. Melanie, you talked about making sure you're talking with the PMs and the trading desk and operations. So I'm seeing it kind of in those chunks. What do you guys think?
I mean, I would say for all of the topics that relate to compliance, one of the things that's been incredibly important for my clients is to have many opinions on what they should be disclosing. So, for example, they may get my opinion, but I also highly suggest they get an opinion from their lawyers. And I'll tell you, across my book of clients, some lawyers have suggested disclosing PPP, and some have suggested not, with good legal reasons for both. Mm-hmm. So what I always have said to them, to the clients, just make sure we have those reasons memorialized, why we have or why we haven't. There's nothing that's been, I would say, incredibly standard about the process, but if you document why you've done what you've done, I think that you will be in good stead.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's exactly what we did at my firm. I mean, we applied for the loan, we took the loan, I spoke with 2 or 3 attorneys, with consultants and compliance consultants and investment consultants and our clients. So I did memorialized our decision process. So it's in the compliance file, and I updated the ADV. But that way, if you're asked about it it could be a year or 2 years from now. We know why we made the disclosure. So, yeah.
I think that's an excellent point. Kind of following up on disclosures, communication, but then evidencing, documenting and evidencing, especially because everyone's working in their own little bubble, making sure, most of it is good faith effort, but at least evidencing that you're doing something. Nicole, I know you had something, and then there actually is a question for us.
Yeah, well, I agree 100%. So, I think it's a lot of people, you go to a lot of different ways with a lot of different clients, so you're going to get different answers, and document. So if you don't write it down and your reasoning and you decide not to disclose it, for instance, well, it's going to be hard if people move around, or years later, you're just not going to remember. I'd say even a month from now, you're not going to remember. As fast as things are going, I have my clients document everything, especially when they're calling me and we're making decisions that are important. Good to have it in your files, and then you can move forward and you have it documented.
So to some extent, life is moving fast, and to some extent, I am living the same day every day.
Right, exactly. The fastest, slowest year ever.
Exactly. There was a question, so I'll ask you guys. How should you handle disclosure if the firm decides to go 100% remote, the lease is expired, and you've chosen not to renew? We were talking about, Melanie and I were talking about, Melanie's got office space in New York City, which is incredibly expensive. Nicole and Jody in Atlanta and Chicago. Firms are saying, why do we need offices? So if a firm decides to go 100% remote, what type of disclosure do you have you seen, or would you suggest?
That would start out with, another than annual amendment for your ADV, number one, in terms of describing your office, where it's located, where the CCO is located. Something important is also your books and records. Where are books and records going to be held? Are they all going to be held virtually? Are you going to have any hard copies of anything? It really depends on the type of firm you have. If you have reps around the country or around a city all working from home, are they going to have client, paper documentation on clients that include any sort of personal identifying information? And then for the CCO, in terms of the reviews you're doing for your different employees, are you going house to house to do reviews in any sort of way? Now, I know FINRA and the SEC do allow your annual compliance training can be done virtually, but are you doing anything else beyond that? So you really need to sit down and work out your risks of doing this. There's no reason why you can't do it. It just needs to be documented, and the processes have to, you want to minimize whatever risks there are out there.
I think that's a great point. Let's shift from kind of communication to nuts and bolts, policies, procedures, business continuity, and so forth. We talked about books and records. Right now, people are in their own houses. How are you dealing with mail? How are you dealing with printing? And how are you dealing with record keeping, and then making sure things are captured? So I'll kind of tee that up as the next kind of conversation.
Yeah, sure. What we're doing is we have our mail now being forwarded to one of the partners, and that's the suggestion from FINRA and the SEC. If you're going to forward mail, it's okay, but it should go to a managing principal. Now, if they don't want to receive it and they want to have someone else receive it, someone who's normally used to opening the mail, they can do that, but then there has to be some sort of procedures in how you're monitoring that person. You don't want firms to have receive some sort of client checks and have inadvertent custody when they don't mean to. So it has to be someone who's knowledgeable of the type of mail that's coming through. Anybody else have any suggestions, Jody or Nicole?
For our clients, some are in a strip mall and it's safe to go into the office. And then I have some of my clients that are in high-rise buildings. with elevators. And so in terms of communication, they have said to their clients, please do not send us anything in the mail because we will send somebody in twice a week to pick up the mail. But if it's timely, you don't want to do that. So again, it sort of goes hand in hand with that communication piece and really by a firm by firm basis on where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, we've been redoing. Oh, I'm echoing, but we've been redoing a lot of agreements and adding in to ensure that electronic delivery is going to be deemed acceptable, because actually a lot of agreements, they still talk about physical mail and things like that, and they're not saying that everything has to be electronic, and that's creating all sorts of problems for my clients. So that's been something that's been critical. We've been doing it for every single client, making sure that they have that ability. And then again, reaching out to clients about, if they're sending in checks, I mean, that's a huge problem. There's going to be delays, and so figuring out who would be the appropriate person to process those checks, and then making sure that it gets to that person from a forwarding perspective.
Yeah, and another thing, as you kind of review and refresh your policies and procedures, making sure your policies and procedures are reflecting sort of these new things, these new protocols that you're doing, because it's so easy, as we talk about the fast pace of everything, it's so easy to get caught up in doing it and forgetting to say, oh, by the way, this is our new process, this is our new procedure. And even if, like for your business continuity plan, even if you were solid on it, it doesn't hurt to at least evidence that you reviewed it during this time, to at least show, hey, we wanted to at least make sure we were checking against our existing policies and procedures and making sure we are in line with what we're actually doing. We do have another question that kind of circles back to the Form ADVs, but before I do that, let's talk a little bit about printing, because I know I'm old school. Some of you as participants know that I'm slightly older than some of the other panelists here. I tend to print. For me, reviewing something, I like to review hard copy. A lot of people cannot print, through their networks. They aren't networked into their home printer. Then there's confidential information. How are you, if you're printing, how are you then either retaining or properly destroying that information? So I'll kind of tee that up, and then before we shift on, I do want to ask one of the panelists a question that came up.
In terms of printing, yeah, that's a tough one, depending on who has the ability to print. I mean, as CCO or your IT group, if you want to limit the people who could print, who has the ability to print with at home, you can do that. You can train people, and they can understand and attest to the fact that if they print something that has information, they have to destroy it. And the problem is, how are you going to supervise and monitor that? So depending on what people are doing and actually printing, it's really a case-by-case basis. I don't know, Jody, if you've heard any SEC questions on that and on recent exams on what people are doing in that respect.
I mean, for my small firms, they really don't print. So we haven't really come across that issue, Dina. Sorry.
And I'd say I haven't seen it on SEC exam requests that I've seen recently. And what I've heard some of my clients are doing is they gave shredders to their employees, so that they have them at home. I mean, again, it's hard to supervise that, but it's there and it's supposed to be used, and at least you could document that was done, and then instructions were given to delete that information.
Yeah.
I do know there's a firm I talked to who had an external drive that could track who is printing and what is being printed. So at least you can kind of monitor that. And, we are in a new world, right? You don't need 4 walls anymore, and you may not need printers. It's going to be an interesting space. Before we move on to SEC exams, one of the questions from the audience was back to the PPP loan and disclosing it on the ADV. The question is, how long must it continue to be disclosed, or when would it be acceptable to remove that information? So any thoughts on that? Have you guys heard anything? Have any guidance?
I haven't, and I don't have the answer on the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at my notes because that's something we did talk about when we updated our ADB. So that's a question or a response. I can come back to you on that. But I mean, at least until the annual update, it will stay up there, and then we'll make the decision then if and when it needs to come off at that time.
All right, I agree. That's probably the best time to reevaluate.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And just one other point from the kind of the firm perspective, working from home, making sure you're looking at your risk matrix. You're looking at your policies and procedures. Make sure you're also looking at that risk matrix. I do want to ask Alec if he wouldn't mind launching the polling questions about the SEC exams, and then we will seamlessly transition to our next topic and our next leader. This one, we've made it easy for those of you who are paying attention at home. This is simply yes, no. You don't have to think about
it. Are you guys seeing the poll?
We're seeing the poll. We're just waiting for the results.
Okay, there we go. I'm seeing the results coming in now. Give me just a few more seconds.
So as I mentioned, we have real life examples. Jody has already had at least 3 SEC exams, and Nicole, when she was in her blackout period, we mentioned that she just got 2 exams this morning. So thank you to Nicole for at least taking the hour to join us.
And to be correct, it wasn't this morning, it was this week, but it feels like it's all happening right now.
Right, because every day is the same.
Yep.
Okay, so there's at least, a quarter, well, not a quarter, I can't do the math, but 16% of you who are going through exams. So thanks to you for taking time out to pay attention. Hopefully we can give you some tips so you can address those. But we will flip back to the panelists. And Jody, if you want to kind of tee this up, that would be great.
Excellent. Thanks, Dina, and thank you for having me. So for the SEC exam, I think it would be helpful to understand my book of business. So I am a part-time chief operating officer to many private funds, hedge funds, and private equity funds, as well as mutual funds and SMA managers. And at any given point in time, I will only have 8 managers where I am their part-time COO. And I will be in charge of finance and compliance and all the operational items for those clients. So it's quite unusual. In the last 18 months, 6 of my 8 clients have had exams. Wow. 3 pre-COVID and 3 post-March. And to understand the breadth of where the SEC is going, one client has been around for 15 years, is a $1 billion manager, private funds, has been registered for a long time. This is our first ever exam. One client, we launched a mutual fund a year ago, has about $300 million under management, and this was their part of the program to get to all new managers within the first year. And then my third manager has been around for decades, about 30 people, about $3 billion, and they are a traditional wealth management firm. So I just found it interesting that in all these different parts of my business, the SEC is coming for us. And to be honest, it's been great. It's so much easier in some respects to get the list. We have had the phone calls and gone through the questions. It's been incredibly efficient to be able to prepare and get information. There has been a focus on how we've been dealing with COVID. And most small managers, my clients, have worked from home in some regard for most of their existence. So it has not been a big issue. I would say the downside, though, is oftentimes when you're in an exam with your SEC examiner, you can tell on their face when they don't really understand your strategy or they don't really understand your setup. So when you're on the phone, you might get random questions that really have nothing to do with your business. So it requires a little bit more education and a little bit more patience on behalf of the manager, I have found. So I would say
have they all been phone or have they been video?
I've only ever done the phone, so I would be interested. I know that there are exams now video, which I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, interesting, and obviously it's even more impactful on the phone, but the whole body language thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell if there's a look of confusion, like
Right.
you guys can see on my face right now.
Yeah.
You can tell if confusion or if there's nodding of the head, like I get it, or like, oh my gosh, that was a bad answer. So that whole sort of interpersonal piece of it, I assume, is totally out the window.
I mean, I totally agree. In our experience, so the first exam, from the first letter that we received, phone call, till we got the deficiency letter, was 4 weeks. So incredibly efficient and fast. And then for the next exam, it was about 2 months. A lot of document requests back and forth. And again, the deficiency letter was something as you forgot to cross the T. So no. And then the third exam, we're on like request 107 of documents. Wow. So what we have found is in this situation, the SEC is asking for proof. If a client died, do you have proof? Do you have their death certificate? Do you have the reason? Do you have the power of attorney? Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of documents that are being produced. And so in this time, I would say now more than ever, what I have found for my clients is they haven't been tending to those documents. So they're on the phone with clients all day, they're trading, they're not documenting. So when I've gotten in to do the annual review, which unfortunately can't be in person, I'm online, the document isn't there. That's been there in past years. So I would just say for firms that are on the phone, with all of the things that you have to worry about, it's so difficult to remember to keep those things in the file, the reasons why we've made decisions, all of those things. That I would say has slowed us down a little bit on the exam side.
One thing I'd say on that, I tend to give my clients kind of exam requests ahead of time, and when I'm preparing them. And so we go through and we create all the different folders for all the types of information that's in there. And then I usually want them to do a training of their employees so they know when they're talking to clients, this is where you store that particular document. So that, when we get this exam and we're doing the annual review, it's just that much easier because everyone gets better trained. And I think it is hard in this remote environment, especially when, they're getting calls and doing things are different. You have maybe re-upping that training, the record-keeping training for the employees is going to be really critical. Because again, with the SEC requests, that's what I'm working on too this week, and finding those documents. They know they have them, and there's no problem with them. It's just finding them at this point has been a challenge.
Yeah. One of the questions, Jody, that came in for you and for Nicole are these routine exams that are coming in, or are they parts of sweeps?
You go ahead and I'll go.
It's been a mix.
Nicole?
So mine, one routine and then 2 newly registered advisors.
I have to say that I went years with newly registered advisors never getting examined.
Yeah.
I've had clients that have been registered for 10 years that had never had an SEC exam. And they've all come calling in this last 12 months.
Yeah. I think the SEC is getting more efficient from what I could tell. They seem more efficient. And so I think that they're processing through these faster. They might not be as in depth, which was kind of good for us. But there's more. So unfortunately, we're doing a lot more than I'm used to.
I have heard that in terms of they're a little bit more direct and focused because they are trying to be efficient. You do lose a little bit of their on site, and you can kind of casually ask them questions, but also when they're on site, they sometimes go down these rabbit holes as well.
Yeah.
So
Right.
hopefully that's helpful. A couple things that came up. One about extensions. Have either of you had clients that asked for extensions in responding to the SEC?
I guess I could start. Usually we have clients try and give the information as they have it available, assuming that I've checked it and it was part of the master plan. But yeah, we oftentimes end up asking for extensions. I mean, we want to make sure, my entire legal team has reviewed anything that's going to be important. They've had compliance and outside professionals review it, and it all makes sense. I always tell people that there's no reward for getting the documents in fast. It's actually better to do a holistic approach, make sure you have kind of a unified plan when submitting the documents, and as long as you maybe start submitting some before the deadline shows that you're working on and you're asking questions. I haven't had a problem kind of receiving extensions. I don't know if I necessarily ask for them in kind of a formal way, just start having produced what they can, and then asking questions, and it might go over that without necessarily asking for a formal extension up front.
And is there any do you guys think there's a trigger, like a red flag from the SEC if you do ask for an extension, like, oh my gosh, you aren't handling this working from home well, that's why you need the extension, or are you concerned about that at all?
Well, I would say at the beginning of each exam, in their letter and in the first phone call, they ask if it's a hardship. They say, is it okay for us to be doing the exam right now? Is there any hardship? So I think that they are really aware. For a small firm, there will be no hardship, but for a larger firm, there could potentially be issues of getting those documents if they're paper documents in an office. So I feel like there's a little bit of give there, Nicole. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're being understanding from what I could tell so far. So as long as you're trying and you're making efforts and you're kind of asking questions and staying in touch with them, I think that's what they want to be seeing. I don't think they wanted an "I got you" moment.
One question that came up is, how are you delivering documents to the SEC confidentially because of these remote exams? Have you seen any difference in how you're delivering documents? I assume
the same portal and everything.
Yeah. Looking at the time no one says that compliance time flies fast, but we're sort of rounding the corner. So what I wanted to do is shift gears, and Alec, I think there's a polling question while we shift gears, is really sort of explain how you marry these SEC exams that Jody was talking about and the work from home that Melanie was talking about, and really kind of connect that into what's your day-to-day life. And the SEC, the OC, had a risk alert where they sort of said, here's some things we highlight. Here's our kind of suggestions, recommendations. We know the SEC never actually recommends anything, but some of the things on our radar. And then how do you deal with that going forward? So Alec, if you want to have that polling question, and then we will flip to Nicole's slides. We'll spend a little bit of time sort of making this real for everybody.
Sure. Is this the policies and procedures one, Dina?
This is the polling question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No.
Yeah, no, go ahead. This is the last set of polling questions. So yeah, policies and procedures in the COVID era.
All right, it's launched. You'll see the poll here in a second.
Perfect. And then as people are kind of responding to this, just wrapping up on one of the questions that came in that kind of circled back on the PPP loan. A question that came in is, what if your firm received the loan, but no repayment was required? So, it was really more a grant as opposed to a loan. Do you guys feel, or have you heard of people actually disclosing that on the ADV, or is it split? and I'll ask Nicole and Jody and Melanie. So the question is, if the loan is forgiven, do you still need to disclose that?
I mean, I would think it'd be a circumstance. You have to see if it's going to be material and if you're going to need to disclose it. I think it could come out, either way. As we talked about before, it's good to get lots of opinions on this and maybe get some different perspectives. But really knowing more about the details would be very important for that.
Yeah.
From my experience, and for the people that we did consult with before we added to our ADV, I think the SEC, if you took a loan, and even if it is, even if you do not have to pay it back, I think they expect to see it on the ADV. What's most important is the language that you use when adding it to your ADV Part 2. Because I think some people feared that if you say that you're receiving the loan, does that mean your firm is in a financial crisis or something like that? And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, we accepted this at the beginning of the situation, and we don't know how long it's going to last. We didn't have our AUM had dropped considerably. That means fees were down. So we want to make sure that people were kept employed. I don't think that's an issue, as long as you abide by your client contracts and your stay in business. That's the best case all around. So you just have to make sure the language you use when you're adding it to the ADV is portrayed in a positive way.
Yeah, I've certainly heard a lot of different positions. Obviously, the most conservative is if you applied and took the loan, disclose it. There are some people who say, as long as you didn't represent that you were in dire straits and needed the loan, maybe you don't have to disclose it. There are some firms who said, I just don't want to take the chance, and rather than disclose it because we're afraid people will think we were in dire straits, we're just going to return the money. So I've kind of seen it across the board. One, obviously I'm a fan of lawyers anyway, but that is definitely one that can't hurt you to run by your lawyer. But I think as long as you have a solid position on why you're disclosing or not disclosing, you at least have some legs to stand on. So go ahead.
Actually, one more thing. My firm manages institutional assets, so we deal with a lot with investment consulting firms and manager of managers who really are our client, who represent the underlying client. But even our clients were taking the loans and their ADV. So we didn't have an issue with disclosing that information.
Yeah. All right. So and then our last segment before we close out is talking about the risk alert. So Nicole, I'm going to let you lead this, and attendees, please don't get scared. We have slides. But these are so you can really understand what we're talking about, because Nicole has a wealth of information. And then, as I mentioned, we do have a checklist for you that we basically translated this media information into something that you can use going forward. Alec, I will let Nicole sort of help you navigate going to the next slide, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And Nicole, take it away.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah. So we thought it'd be helpful. This checklist is going to be very important. We're going to go through these 6 different requirements that the OC ended up saying are important things to consider during this COVID period. So we're just going to walk through some of the 6. We're probably not going to get through all of them during this period, but you have this. You're going to have the slide, and you're going to have our cheat sheet. So we could use this more as kind of a discussion and go through what's going to end up being important for you. So, Alec, if you can now move to the next slide, we'll start with protection of investor assets. So here we talked about this a little bit. So it's already clearly an issue, figuring out how to deal with investor checks. The OC risk alerts identified this problem and trying to figure out, how you communicate with investors, disclose to them that if they're going to still mail it to your current location, there's going to be delays. And so really figuring out how your normal practices are different in terms of check kind of processing and dealing with customers. So I don't know if you guys had any further comments to this recommendation by the SEC. Nope. Okay. So I think we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I think, just as you talk about going in and getting the mail physically,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things firms are struggling with is who is the responsible person who is gatekeeping your office?
Yep.
Whether it's the small staff of employees coming in, whether it's, are you having most of your employees come in, and is it mandated or voluntary? Are you having clients come in? And then, finally, are you having vendors and other partners and doing due diligence visits as well? So, figuring out who that lucky person might be. So, Alec, I think we've got, we want to go back to the slides. We've got kind of your thumbnails on that. Great. All right.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, so as we talked about, having somebody that normally would handle checks end up getting those is, I think, the key that we've been dealing with a lot of clients. Another issue that the SEC pointed out were transfer requests. So obviously this is a period of a lot of fraud going on right now. So trying to make sure that activities with respect to client accounts were actually activities from the client. So making sure that that there aren't some kind of unusual or unscheduled withdrawals. So depends on how well you know your clients, making sure that when you do, if you're going to do any kind of transfer, that you've authenticated the person, the bank accounts that are going to be used. That's going to be really important. And then also one thing that SEC mentioned, and we're having a lot of discussions with clients, is this notion of having a trusted contact person in case there's some reason to suspect that maybe they're elderly or incapacitated, or they might be under some kind of undue influence. But the problem with this is a lot of people, I think there was maybe an IAA template or something that people were coming to me with, and it would basically say that the advisor is going to go to this trusted contact in case there's any issues. The problem is that it's putting the responsibility on the advisor potentially to spot suspicious activity and then take on that responsibility that they're then expected to go to that trusted person. But that could be very difficult. Advisors and traders aren't necessarily psychologists. They don't necessarily know all the things to spot, or they're even nervous to bring it up. So we understand the SEC's concern in this regard, and definitely working with clients to make this possible. But again, there's the real risk that you're putting another layer of responsibility on advisors that could get them in trouble in the future. So I think this was an interesting one from the SEC, and I've been seeing a lot. I mean, we've been dealing with kind of the elderly discussions for a while, but then the fact that it came up in the OC risk alert was, I think, a big one, and important to put it on kind of everyone's radar again, especially in this COVID period. So I'm curious from the panel here, what you've been handling or seeing in terms of kind of these fraudulent activities, and how we might go about shoring that up for our client or our clients.
I mean, we see a lot of the fraudulent emails trying to get the money wired out.
Yep.
And so to me, it's continuous training for people that are getting those emails. But a lot on the private wealth side, my clients are having a really hard time getting access to those senior investors. And even to, if it's their children or their power of attorney that they're going to meet with, if they live in an assisted living facility, they do not have access to them, cannot get signatures and those types of things. So, I just think that it's going to require an extra effort to make sure that our seniors are protected.
Mm-hmm.
Those lengths, I think the SEC recognizes it's not perfect right now.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Like striking the balance, protecting the investors, and then making sure that the advisors don't get themselves in trouble either, trying to make the protections.
Right.
All right.
All right, Nicole, knowing that we have just a few minutes left, do you want to hit some of the kind of the higher risk areas that you think RIAs should focus on?
I mean, I think supervision's a big one. We touched on it a little bit, but making sure that there's the same level of oversight. So now people are spread out all over. You know, a lot of our clients, everybody was on the same floor, same floors. So it was very easy for them to just be able to see people interact kind of on kind of a supervisory basis, but it didn't necessarily feel like that. And so making sure that there's all, I guess, the infrastructure in there to do the supervision, figuring out if the roles have changed in any way. I think that's also very important. And then updating your compliance procedures accordingly. Another big one is due diligence reviews, especially of the investments themselves. So a lot of our clients would normally do due diligence reviews on the underlying investment managers, on the underlying investment portfolio companies. They're just not able to do that anymore. So you could have web meetings, but it's just not the same as actually kicking the tires. So updating those policies and procedures with what you're doing and really thinking about, well, how do we supervise the situation? So that's some of the issues that we've been grappling with.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting as you were saying, and I was thinking, in some sense, we're so much more insular because we're all working from home. But then it's also sort of more global because nobody's in one office together, right? We're all sort of all over the place. It is kind of this.
I would say one of the positives of the pandemic is doing that due diligence. Oftentimes, we can get a whole group on. We can get not only the portfolio manager, but also all of his analysts in one meeting. We can get the chief compliance officer and the compliance staff, where normally we may just meet with one. So I think that sometimes doing the meetings have been helpful when you go to one location, but the underlying manager has multiple locations. So
yeah, that's true. When you can finally find the time, right? Everybody is the scheduling nightmare that is COVID-19. And just looking at the time, we've got maybe another 2 minutes to hit the other key salient points, Nicole.
Let's see. I'd say if we go to fees and expenses, so this is one. I mean, it's always an issue, but just making sure you're watching what people are doing. There's been a lot of trying to increase fees because of pressures, and so you're rolling people over to different IRAs, trying to put them in your own products. We've had a lot of clients making advisors making loans to their clients, and so there's a lot of paperwork involved in that. And I know they're trying to help them, and it's for good reasons, but there's a lot of conflict, and so you have to document all that and be thinking very carefully. And I should definitely work with legal counsel on that. Same with putting clients in higher fee products in general. So if things have termination fees, moving to the next slide, calculation of valuation. So that's huge. So it's really hard right now to do valuations. Doing the best you can in terms of figuring out the fair value document. We can't say that enough. That's what's going to be key here. So you're going to be able to support those valuations, because that's how you're determining a lot of your fee payments. So I know the SEC is going to be looking at that. I'm seeing it kind of in the exam request, and it's a standard problem, but I think it's increased even more. So I think extreme due diligence on expense calculations is going to be really important.
Nicole, with hard assets, right? Real estate. Where you can't go and
private investments. It's very challenging right now, and so I mean, I've had more valuation conversations than ever.
Excellent. All right, one more. We can squeeze it in. Come on.
Okay, I think we're gonna skip investment fraud. Just all the traders have to know that you have to be investing for the best interest, and got to make sure that underlying investments aren't a problem. Business continuity, I think we've covered it pretty good. I'd say the main thing I wanted to cover here was the credential stuffing. So we might even want to go to, I think it's one of the last pages. But there was a separate risk alert from the SEC regarding credential stuffing. So that's essentially this new fraud where they're basically sending your usernames and passwords rapid fire, and it's this way of cyber attack. And so the SEC is saying making sure that you have firewalls specific to credential stuffing, that You are updating your regulation SP to make sure that it's going to cover credential stuffing and ensuring that you're going to have best industry practices in this regard. The main test that's being used, you might start hearing of this, is the CAPTCHA test. So that's completely automated public Turing test to test computers and humans apart. So undergoing those tests so that you're going to be able to tell the difference, kind of automatically having that be part of your structure is going to be important. So those are some high levels.
I can't identify the right boxes where the stoplights are. I can't do it. I cannot do it. All right. And Alec, I think there's one more slide that Nicole was talking about. The keep going. It was there you go. So that's what she was talking about in credential stuffing. So looking at the time, and can you believe that an hour with compliance and legal professionals went this fast? And it was completely free. So probably the best 60 minutes you spent all week. So I want to absolutely thank our panelists. What a fabulous job that you've done. Thanks all of our attendees for participating in our inaugural Jute webinar, and we hope you stay tuned. We've got blog posts and other information that comes out. Certainly look up our panelists, and they are movers and shakers in the industry. So if you want to know more, let us know about them, and we can connect you. And as we mentioned, we are going to have a checklist that is a nice party favor that you can use to redecorate your offices. So for those of you who've been staring at the same pictures for too long, the checklist is gorgeous, and use it as new wallpaper. So, Alec, I don't see any more slides. I think we need to wrap it up. So we will ask you to stay tuned.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.